Well, up first, let's get to the latest on Sri Lanka. And Sri Lanka erupted in outrage on Wednesday with violent protests, clashes between citizens and security forces, tear gas shelling, all resulting in the death of a student.
Very sad and tragic there, Gargi, but that curfew that was put into place has now been lifted. It was lifted at about 5 o'clock this morning, with Wickremesinghe, acting president, asked the military as well as the police to restore order, saying whatever it takes, whatever is necessary should be done in order to restore that peace in the country, fearing backlash from civilians. Gotabaya Rajapaksa has requested the Maldives government to arrange a private jet to fly him to Singapore. Government sources in Maldives have said that Rajapaksa had fled to Maldives, and this happened late Tuesday night, early Wednesday morning, without handing over his resignation.
Now, the Lankan political leaders held an all-party meeting where they decided that the parliament speaker will take over as the acting president. The office of Ranil Wickremesinghe, who's been asked to step down, said the ruling party and opposition must form an all-party government. He also asked the speaker to nominate a prime minister who's acceptable to both the government and the opposition. Let's go across to Shrija now for more. So, Shrija, what is expected on the political front today with the Ranil Wickremesinghe asked to go, and also what's the situation like now on the street given the curfew has ended at 5 this morning?
Well, after the situation went out of control, Prime Minister and the acting president had imposed curfew, island-wide curfew, till about 5 a.m. Now that's been lifted, so it is back to normal at the moment. The business is back to normal. But if I have to really show you what's happening on the streets, this is, for example, the fuel queue that we are in fact showing you. Now this particular fuel queue has been there for over a week now, and due to the shortage of fuel, we see not really, people have been struggling to find fuel, whether it's petrol or diesel for that matter. The queue has extended for 5 to 6 days. Several people have been, in this particular queue day in, day out. They're having sleepless nights. So this is on one hand what's really happening here out on streets. On the other hand, what we're looking at, several of especially Sri Lankan citizens taking out on the streets and protesting and demanding that Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe should resign from his position as the Prime Minister. So on the political front, there are various developments that took place since morning till about late night. What we do know is that when a cabinet meeting was held by Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, it had arrived at a consensus that an all-party government will be formed. But he also did, of course, inform that he will be informing the Speaker that a new Prime Minister will have to be elected. Now that sends out a message that he will remain as the acting president, which the citizens of Sri Lanka, to which they are objecting, because when you really have the dynastic politics that have carried out for years together, that has pushed them out here on the streets, whether that is for essentials, food or medicines, they also say that they don't really want Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe to continue as the acting president. On the other hand, all party leaders meet was also held, and they have arrived at a consensus, and they've informed the Speaker that the Speaker must be made the acting president. Now it is not just the all party leaders but also citizens. So both the parties, two different stakeholders, want Ranil to go back home, and only because we understand the minute that Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe took over as the acting president, we understand that his office was once again captured by the citizens of Sri Lanka, because several warnings have been sent out by citizens of Sri Lanka. The first was, of course, the presidential palace, which they had captured, that belongs to Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa. After that, we did go on to see the temple trees, the official residence of Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe, and then the presidential secretariat, of course, after which we also saw now the presidential office. So as far as the citizens of Sri Lanka are concerned, they say they're not going to stop at nothing. In fact, they want to see Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe resign and that a new regime be brought, because they also say if that's not really going to happen, the next step could also be laying siege to the parliament.
All right, so Shrija, are we to understand that today some clarity will emerge as to who will be the acting president if Ranil Wickremesinghe will not, and tomorrow is when the parliament is to convene?
Yes, there are two things to be looked at over here. There are, some of the crucial developments that's going to take place. Yes. On the 15th, Parliament will convene and they will be deciding in terms of who will be the President. Now, that was the reason why the Parliament was planning to convene. But now we see the acting President is Ranil Wickremesinghe himself, because Ranil Wickremesinghe has informed the Speaker that a new Prime Minister will have to be appointed. So he's sent out a clarity, saying that he will remain as the acting President. A new Prime Minister will have to be appointed. If you clearly remember, on the 9th of July, he had expressed his willingness to step down from his position of Prime Ministership and then hand over all the duties to a new government. So that is likely to happen tomorrow. The big developments are going to happen. We're going to wait and see in terms of what can happen on ground, because on one hand you have Sri Lankan citizens, capturing political offices so that Ranil Wickremesinghe steps down. On the other hand, you have, especially where Parliament, convening for tomorrow, and two different developments, that is on all-party meet, where they are saying that Speaker must become the acting President. On the other hand, you have two different groups, that is especially Ranil Wickremesinghe's group, where they're saying that they want a new Prime Minister to be elected.
Right. Thank you so much, Shrija, for joining us with all those details. We will keep coming back to you for more as far as the situation in Sri Lanka is concerned. Gargi, also the United States putting out this tweet. In fact, this is a tweet by the ambassador saying the United States reiterates our call for calm at this time. We urge all parties to approach this juncture with a commitment to the betterment of the nation and to work quickly to implement solutions that will bring long-term economic as well as political stability. The ambassador also said that we condemn all violence and call for the rule of law to be upheld. A peaceful transfer of power within Sri Lanka's democratic as well as constitutional framework is essential so the people's demands for accountability, transparency, democratic governance and a better future can be realized.
Now, India has denied any role in President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's escape to the Maldives. The High Commission assured that it stands with the people of Sri Lanka.
But the protesters are furious with Rajapaksa's disappearance and with the fact that Wickremesinghe now is cracking down on protests as the acting president.
Dramatic scenes at Ranil Wickremesinghe's office as thousands of protesters stormed the PMO. They are furious that Wickremesinghe has taken over as interim president. The police used tear gas to fend off the crowds.
Multiple rounds of tear gas is being shelled at the moment outside Ranil's office. Sorry.
That's fine.
The crisis in the island country deepened this morning as people woke up to the news that President Gotabaya Rajapaksa had fled to the Maldives with his wife overnight on a military plane. Reports say his final destination could be Singapore or the United Arab Emirates. On their arrival in the Maldives, President Rajapaksa, his wife and bodyguards were driven to an undisclosed location under police escort. Reports claim the president's younger brother and former finance minister Basil Rajapaksa has also left the country. The Indian High Commission in Sri Lanka meanwhile dismissed reports claiming that India had helped President Rajapaksa and his brother Basil to flee. Over the weekend, Rajapaksa had promised to resign today, that is Wednesday, and his failure to do so, along with his decision to leave Sri Lanka, angered protesters even more. It was virtual anarchy on the streets of Colombo as protesters took over government buildings and even the state broadcaster who went off air.
We don't have the food right now, we don't have gas, we don't have petrol, we don't have diesel, we don't have anything really, we don't have dollars. So all the poor people suffers a lot.
The people there, they don't have food, they don't have enough fuels, they are on the street. I don't know, this situation will become worse.
He left the country without signing his resignation. The speaker and the whole country hope that he would, send his resignation properly.
Ranil Wickremesinghe made a televised statement warning rioters that military and police had been told to restore law and order. He imposed curfew in a key province along with a state of emergency in the country.
ගෝඨාභය රාජපක්ෂ ජනාධිපතිතුමා ඉල්ලා අස්වීමෙන් පසුව ඇතිවෙන තත්ත්වය සාකච්ඡා කරන්නට සවුන්ද දවල් පක්ෂ නායකයින් මුණ ගැහුණා.
Under Sri Lanka's constitution, Gotabaya Rajapaksa has conferred powers on Ranil Wickremesinghe to function as the acting president under Article 37.1, which means Gotabaya has not yet formally resigned. If and when he does, then Parliament has to elect one of its MPs as president. The successor will hold the office for the remainder of the term of the vacating president. This election has to be held within 1 month of the vacancy arising. On Tuesday, expecting that the president would resign on the 13th of July, as he had said, the speaker had announced the date of the election as 20th July.
What next? Because now that Ranil Wickremesinghe has become the acting president and Gotabaya Rajapaksa has left his country and fled from his country, leaving his citizens, forcing them onto the streets, citizens here say that they are not going to stop and that they will continue, and their next target is going to be laying siege to the parliament. Reporting inside Ranil Wickremesinghe's office in Colombo with camera person Kumar Srija for NDTV.
So what really brought Sri Lanka to the brink, and why has its economy been in shambles, leading to the untold misery for its citizens as the political leaders in fact washed off all their responsibilities from what the situation in fact spiraled down to the way it did? Our colleague Priyanshi gets us the details.
Why is Sri Lanka witnessing its worst economic crisis since independence? Essentially, it's a story of more expenses and less revenue that led to a cash-strapped Lanka. It started long ago. In 2009, Sri Lanka decided to use their products only for domestic consumption, and they decided to not export. This cut export earnings while their import bill was still rising, meaning that money kept going out of the country, but it wasn't coming in. Cut to 2019, Gotabaya Rajapaksa got elected as the president. His government announced sharp tax cuts. They cut the VAT rate from 12% to 8%. This costed Sri Lanka $2.2 billion annually. Government's policies cut income, leading to expenses exceeding revenue. Then, to make problems worse, in 2019, there were the Easter bombings that killed over 250 people in Sri Lanka. In 2020, the pandemic hit. Both these reasons hurt the tourism industry that was the third largest source of forex in Sri Lanka in 2019. Then in 2020-21, the government took large unsustainable loans to fund their expenses, leading to a debt trap. In 2021, the government's foreign debt surged to $35 billion. With no money left, Sri Lanka defaulted on all its external debt for the first time in history this year. Their annual imports are over $3 billion more than exports, which lead to Lanka running out of their foreign exchange reserves. Foreign reserves plummeted 70% in 2 years, and because of a scarcity of funds, Lanka could not pay for its imports, and people couldn't get basic essentials such as food and fuel, and they then took to the streets to protest against their government's mismanagement.
Well, to talk more about the situation in Sri Lanka, we're now joined by Savannah Mutu, Executive Director for Centre for Policy Alternatives from Colombo. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. And so currently in Sri Lanka, we to understand it's a state of limbo with Ranil Wickremesinghe as acting president. Now the all-party meeting asking that he resign and the speaker take over, and tomorrow the parliament is to convene.
Absolutely. I mean, the whole thing has been sort of held to ransom by the president not sending in his letter of resignation to the speaker. Because once that happens, the constitutional process for electing a new president can be put into train, So Gotabaya Rajapaksa, wherever he is, whether he's in Male or in Singapore or whatever, he promised to send his letter of resignation to the speaker on the 13th, yesterday. That has not happened. And it can only happen. And therefore, once it happens, it is the only way in which we can move forward within the constitutional framework.
All right. So currently, what happens next? Now the curfew is over. We saw those, terrible scenes yesterday of the clashes and tear gas being used, and the young protesters. One student even died in those protests. So that was very sad to see. Also, Ranil Wickremesinghe asking the army to do whatever it has to have some sort of control.
And calm
exactly.
in the country.
So what does that mean? And what role does the army now play here?
No, asking the army to do whatever it needs to do is very, very risky and very fatal because, as you can see, people can be killed as a consequence. The army needs to act with restraint. The protesters have a right to protest. There has to be a semblance of law and order and government in Sri Lanka. So, Ranil Wickremesinghe giving blanket orders to the army to do whatever is necessary is, I think, not appropriate at all in that respect. So once the letter comes, and we hope that that letter does come, then we can set the constitutional process in train. The party leaders yesterday called upon the Prime Minister to resign from his position as acting president. Now, there is no constitutional process that says that the Speaker then can become the president, because the constitutional process says that the President appoints the acting president. But we are now shifting towards a situation in the absence of that letter of resignation where we will have to go extra constitutionally to have a stable government.
That's right. And, all this talk of an all-party government coming in, when do you see that happening? And as right now it's this crisis, these protests, the clashes, but only when you have, a legitimate leader or government in place then they start the process of pulling Sri Lanka out of this economic mess and, the situation that the common man is finding themselves in with these long queues for bare necessities.
Absolutely. If the president's letter comes in, then the constitutional processes can be initiated. On the other hand, they're calling upon the Prime Minister to resign, and so they might move into a kind of extra constitutional process because there is no stipulation in the Constitution with regard to the Speaker becoming acting president if the president has not resigned.
Right, sir, the deadline for the new president was the 20th of July. Does that still stand?
Well, that stands only on the basis that the letter of resignation from Gotabaya Rajapaksa is received.
Right, you're going on emphasizing about this letter. So, if that letter doesn't come, as you said, some extra constitutional sort of measures will have to be taken, because right now, as you said, Gotabaya Rajapaksa is in the Maldives and there's all this talk that he wants to go to Singapore and from there perhaps to the UAE. And how likely is it that in the midst of all this, where he's trying, to save himself, he's going to be sending in that letter and, really following the constitution in Sri Lanka?
Well, if he doesn't send the letter, the acting president, that is Ranil Wickremesinghe, has to resign. And then Parliament will have to decide that the Speaker becomes the President. But there are no provisions in the Constitution stipulating that that is what should happen. And that's what I mean by going outside of the Constitution.
So this state of limbo currently so who is in charge right now?
Well, we have an acting president who protesters are demanding should resign. We have opposition party leaders who are demanding that the acting president should resign. So we don't really have a clear, uncontested leader of government in Sri Lanka at the present moment.
And again, coming back to the army, Sri Lanka's never had a history that the army plays such a big role in terms of, in being in charge in the country. So that's not something you fear right now.
No, one does fear it, because in a situation in which there isn't a proper executive, then the army could step in on the grounds of trying to restore law and order. So that risk is certainly there. We can't discount it.
And meanwhile, the pathetic conditions in terms of what we've seen, these long, endless lines for fuel and essentials, that continues?
Absolutely. That continues.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And clearly, Sri Lanka in a state of limbo, much confusion right now, and hopefully some clarity perhaps today or maybe tomorrow when Parliament does meet. But hopefully right now that things will remain calm and we won't see the kind of violence and protest that we saw breaking out yesterday with tear gas being used, and as we said, one student even losing his life in those protests. Well, with that, we'll slip into a short break. On the other side, we'll take a look at the monsoon and other news as well.
Red alert warning issued for many states. I'll get you the latest on that. Welcome back. With the rise in coronavirus cases, the central government has taken another step to promote vaccination in the country, Gargi.
That's right. And giving details, Union Minister Anurag Thakur said on Wednesday that citizens above 18 years of age will be given booster doses free of cost from the 15th, that's tomorrow, for 75 days.
If you look at the earlier program, out of 199 crore vaccine administered as of today, the number which are above 18 years of age stands at 181 crore plus. That is the vaccine administered as of now. So it's going to be a large population which will be given booster dose free of cost from 15 July onwards for a period of 75 days. So anyone who gets the vaccine, the booster dose vaccine, in those 75 days won't have to pay even a single rupee on that.
Very tragic news now coming in from Oman. A man from Maharashtra and his 6-year-old son drowned while playing at a beach in Oman. The man's 9-year-old daughter is missing and rescuers are searching for her, is what the local authorities are saying in Oman. Gargi, very, very tragic news coming in from there.
All right, just take a look at those visuals. People standing on the beach as the wave after wave came, and then you can see those children being swept away. Absolutely tragic. It's Shashikant Mahamane, 42 years old, his wife and their children, Shruti, who was 9. She's missing. Shreyas, who's 6. They live in Dubai and they were in neighboring Oman for a day-long trip on Sunday. This video taken by another tourist shows Shruti and Shreyas being swept away by the strong wave while playing in the water, and their father soon followed them to save them, but he too drowned. Absolutely tragic.
Look at these waves crashing, Gargi. Very, very tragic news. They're going on a holiday which can turn tragic and fatal. Being on the beach on a Sunday and being swept away like that. Let's just hope that sister of Shreyas is found.
Right, and perhaps there should have been a warning for tourists not to be there at the time. But time for us to slip into a short break. On the other side, we'll tell you about the rain outlook today.
Right, very heavy showers expected again in central parts of the country. When will monsoon shift its focus from central India towards the northern part? We'll get you that and a whole lot more.
Welcome back. Let's now take a look at the weather and the monsoon across the country, and rain fury continuing in several states with the Indian Met Department having forecast heavy to extremely heavy rainfall, and the flood situation expected to further worsen in the country with at least 8 states expecting very heavy rainfall.
Right, Gargi, the Central Water Commission's latest daily flood situation report warns that a total number of 22 rivers are now flowing above the danger mark in the country as rain continues to hit different parts of Karnataka. The Chief Minister there has in fact said that 32 people have lost their lives and 500 crore rupees have now been assigned, and those will be released to restore the basic infrastructure that got damaged.
So rivers in the region have swelled, dams have reached the brim, and there's severe waterlogging in agricultural fields and low-lying areas causing damage to crops and properties. And it's mainly along the western coast as well that we're seeing a lot of this very, very heavy rainfall. But the monsoon also moving southwards now, and let's go across to Sam for more on that. And Sam, there's a red alert there as well. In fact, schools are closed today in several districts in the Nilgiris.
That's right, Gargi and Divya. In 2 districts, in the case of Nilgiris, schools in 4 taluks would remain shut for the second day. These include schools in Kudalur, Pandalur, Kunda and Mutu. And in the case of Coimbatore, it's schools at Valpare, where they received up to 60.6 millimeters rain till 5:30 this morning. And there was some relief in the case of Nilgiris, which received only around 0.7 millimeters, 7 millimeters in fact. And although this is not the season for the monsoon in Tamil Nadu, which largely receives during the northeast monsoon in the month of September onwards, this time the spillover from Kerala, because of the southwest monsoon, has led to rains in these pockets. The worry, of course, in these hill towns is possibilities of landslide. That's why authorities are not taking any chances, and they've declared holiday for schools in these taluks. And in the Mutu, or the Stanley Reservoir in Mutu in Salem district, there's heavy inflow into the reservoir because of heavy outflow from the Kabini and the Krishnarajasagar reservoirs in Karnataka, which receive good rainfall, and there is a flood alert for the 5th day in the Hogeneckal area, and local tourism has suffered a hit. The people who run coracles have also been advised not to venture into the river, which runs in spate at the moment. Gargi and Divya.
Right, in the southern part of the country, in fact, there's a 34% surplus. Gargi, in a matter of just 24 hours, from 29%, that surplus has gone up to 34. That's very rare as far as the monsoon season is concerned. What's also unusual is that long stretch, that long spell of, heavy showers that we've seen starting, in fact, since last week, continuing in central and southern part of the country. So that surplus in the country that we're seeing, Gargi, mainly because of the way it's been raining in the south.
All right, and in Madhya Pradesh as well, Bhopal has sounded a red alert, the meteorological department there, for heavy rain in all districts of Narmadapuram divisions, including Betul and Harda, including Chhindwara and the Burhanpur districts as well. An orange alert of a very heavy rainfall has also been sounded.
Right, Gargi, if we just take into account the kind of surplus that we're seeing in the country, of course, that red alert warning situation there. But when you take into account Saurashtra and Kutch, where it's rained over 800% surplus in a matter of 24 hours, 864% to be precise. In fact, other areas like Marathwada, 1,393% surplus. Then we have over 500% in Vidarbha, over 1,000% in Telangana, and in Gujarat, the situation is now coming in with a surplus of 253%. So you can see the surplus there, and it gives you an account of the kind of rainfall we are seeing. So the focus seems to be coming off Gujarat, but now mainly in the southern part is Telangana, Vidarbha, and also areas of Marathwada, where it's been raining way more than it should be during the monsoon season.
The big question now is, when will it move northwards? Because ironically, in other parts of the country, there's a scarcity of rainfall leading to major concerns for farmers in Bihar.
Right, so a 38% deficit as far as Bihar is concerned, but in other parts of the country. So right now what's happening, Gargi, is the monsoon is south of its normal position, which means that it's focusing in central parts, is focusing on the southern part of the country. There you can see that 34% surplus, central parts 25%. It's not focusing towards the east or the northeast. Of course, that is quite a relief for the northeastern states like Assam and Meghalaya, where it had been raining extremely so. But now when the monsoon trough will move back into its position, it will start to focus along the Indo-Gangetic plains, which is Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, and that's
what farmers are waiting for, because it's the sowing season and many of them are extremely worried by the lack of rain. Here's a report.
The barren fields of Rohtas in central Bihar, known as the Rice Bowl as it produces the most paddy in the state. But here and in much of the state, it has barely rained this week or the week before. In fact, Bihar this week has suffered the largest deficient rainfall, 97%, in the entire country. Farmers are worried about a drought and are beginning to count their losses.
परेशानी तो ई बा कि बारिश ना होके के चलते पहले तो बिया सूखे के समस्या बा, कैसहू बिया जियावत नहीं जाए, लेकिन सरकार ही जान ली रुआ कि ना बाल बच्चा पढ़ पाइहन, ना हमनी के खेत रोपा पाई.
In Moresarai village, 10 kilometers from the district headquarters Sasaram, farmers are saying most of the reservoirs have roughly less than 30% water this year, which has compounded the rainfall shortage problem.
बारिश से किसान का खेती नहीं हो रहा है. आज तक मतलब कुछ अभी तक सिंचाई का कोई व्यवस्था नहीं हुआ और बारिश का कोई नामो निशान नहीं है, जिससे कि भूखमरी की समस्या उत्पन्न हो जाएगी.
Although in view of the grim situation, the Nitish Kumar government is considering several options, time is running out for the farmers. They can wait at best for another 7 days for the rain. With inputs from Ajay Pandey in Sasaram, an NDTV Bureau Report.
Now a red alert warning continues, Gargi, for Maharashtra, whether it's Madhya Maharashtra, the coastline, Konkan, Goa, and you can see the situation in Palghar where heavy showers have been noted.
And in Palghar, workers had to be rescued. There were workers of a GR infrastructure project who were trapped by the Vetarna river near Bahadoli, and finally they were rescued by the NDRF team there.
Moving on, Yashwant Sinha, the opposition candidate for the presidential election that's to take place on the 18th of this month, Gargi, said former Maharashtra Chief Minister Uddhav Thackeray has been forced to support his opponent, that's the NDA candidate Draupadi Murmu.
He said, I'm not fighting a political party, but the might of the central government, while talking to reporters in Guwahati.
जहाँ तक शिवसेना का सवाल है तो आप जानते हैं कि वो पार्टी टूट गई, उनकी अपनी मजबूरी है, उस मजबूरी में उनको सपोर्ट करना पड़ रहा है, लेकिन मैं आपसे साफ शब्दों में कहना चाहता हूं कि राष्ट्रपति चुनाव के ठीक पहले इस प्रकार की तोड़-फोड़ जो हो रही है वो भारत सरकार के द्वारा की जा रही है। अपने शक्तियों का दुरुपयोग करके भारत सरकार कई लोगों के लिए एक परिस्थिति पैदा कर रही है जिसमें कि वो विवश हो जाएं, कंपेल हो जाएं अपना वोट उनको देने के लिए।
And staying with news of the presidential elections and a controversy involving Congress in remarks that have evoked a sharp reaction from the ruling side, Congress leader Ajay Kumar said that Draupadi Murmu, the presidential candidate for the NDA, represents a very evil philosophy of India.
Gargi Kumar has said that Murmu is a decent person, but the philosophy that she represents is evil. He advised against making the NDA presidential candidate a representative of tribals, accusing Narendra Modi's government of fooling the countrymen. The Congress leader said while Ramnath Kovind, who belongs to the scheduled caste community, is the current president of the country, atrocities against the country have not stopped.
Hitting back at Kumar over his remarks, the BJP has criticized them. Union Minister Smriti Irani said a tribal lady who's devoted her life towards uplifting the downtrodden, exhibited impeccable administrative skills and has risen as a role model for millions is today mocked and insulted by the Congress. While Union Minister Piyush Goyal said a tribal woman rising from the grassroots to become a candidate for the post of India's next president is called democracy at work and merit getting its due. He too hit out at the Congress for its criticism, saying Congress is amplifying the evil philosophy that can't stand such strong representation of India's Adivasis.
Right, and the Congress leader Ajay Kumar then later issued this clarification. Let's just listen in.
So how do you see in the presidential election, your ally partner in Maharashtra, Shiv Sena, has decided to support Draupadi Murmu for the president candidate? How do you see this?
No, look, I'm not sure about the because
Thackeray has given the statement.
Okay, so my thing is very simple. It's not about Draupadi Murmu. It's not individual at all. It's not comparing two candidates. Yashwant Sinha ji is also a very good candidate. Draupadi Murmu ji is also a decent person. But she represents a very evil philosophy of India.
देखिए, एनडीए किस कैंडिडेट को आगे बढ़ाए वो उनके ऊपर है, उस पर हमें कोई आपत्ति नहीं थी। द्रौपदी मुर्मू जी के बारे में हमने हमेशा कहा है कि एक अच्छी महिला है। समस्या उनके जो एनडीए के विचारधारा पर हमने जो टिप्पणी की थी, बीजेपी के जो नफरत वाली, जहरीली वाली जो विचारधारा है, इसी विचारधारा को तो सरदार पटेल ने बैन किया था 1950 में।
And now cracks in the Maha-Vikas Aghadi government in Maharashtra seem to be growing, with Congress's Milind Deora writing to Chief Minister Eknath Shinde and Maharashtra's Deputy Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis accusing the Shiv Sena of gerrymandering wards ahead of the all-important BMC elections in the state.
Deora was recently appointed as an observer for the assembly elections in Gujarat, which are scheduled for later this year. Deora has been critical of the Shiv Sena even when the Congress was sharing power in the alliance led by the Shiv Sena Gargi. Of course, speaking to NDTV, Milind Deora said the Congress was willing to walk away from the Maha-Vikas Aghadi if the Congress interests were not looked after. Let's listen in.
Mr. Deora has written to Eknath Shinde, who's now the Chief Minister and the Sena rebel, and to Devendra Fadnavis, the Deputy Chief Minister from the BJP. Sir, you've written this very strong letter. You're accusing them of gerrymandering, which is a term, as we know, from American politics, where is, formation of wards to suit one party's interests. Any specific points you've made on the letter?
Look, let me first begin by saying that Mumbai Municipal Corporation, like you mentioned, it's one of the wealthiest, most prestigious municipal corporations, not just in India, but in Asia. It's by far the richest municipality in India. It has a budget equal to maybe some states in India. We are in the middle of a monsoon right now. We see flooding, we see potholes, we see a breakdown of civic infrastructure and civic governance. Most Mumbaikars don't know who the mayor of the city is and who's in charge of the city. Surely every Mumbaikar deserves a chance to vote in a free and fair election, in a democratically conducted election in Asia and India's most prestigious and richest civic body, and demand governance and accountability from those in power. Unfortunately, the method by which the redrawing of constituencies, the delimitation process of Mumbai wards was conducted a few months ago, the method by which the wards were reserved was done to suit one particular party. There's no question about it. Your next question to me would be, why weren't objections raised at the time? Objections were raised at the time. The Congress party, being a part of MVA, did raise those objections at a party forum and at a Government of Maharashtra forum. Unfortunately, Shiv Sena went ahead unilaterally and reserved and redrew these wards. So I don't want to make this a political issue and get into a issue within MVA. This is an issue which, in my opinion, is about the people of Mumbai.
In other news now, actor Rhea Chakrabarti was charged on Wednesday for buying drugs for her actor boyfriend Sushant Singh Rajput, who died in 2020, by the country's anti-drugs agency. The charge sheet filed by the Narcotics Control Bureau names her and 34 others as accused in the high-profile case.
Chakrabarti has been charged with purchasing and financing a small quantity of marijuana. Her brother Shovik Chakrabarti has also been named as an accused. The NCB has said she received and delivered marijuana to late actor Sushant Singh. She also made payments for it at his insistence, is what they said.
That's right. And now this evidence will be placed before a judge who will decide if they can proceed. All right, with that, time for us to slip into a short break. A lot more coming up on the other side.
Right, Gargi, we'll get you the latest on the UK race for the new Prime Minister. Who will be replacing Boris Johnson being the big question. We'll get you that and a whole lot more on the other side.
Well, let's get you the latest on Sri Lanka now, which erupted in outrage on Wednesday with protests, clashes between citizens and security forces and tear gas shelling, all resulting in the death of a student.
A curfew was put into place till about 5 o'clock this morning, and Wickremesinghe, the acting president, asked the military and the police to restore order, saying whatever it takes, whatever is necessary, do that in order to bring about peace in the country. The Lankan political leaders held an all-party meeting where they decided that the parliament speaker will take over as the acting president. The office of Wickremesinghe, who has been asked to step down, said the ruling party and the opposition must form an all-party government, and that's expected, in fact, between today and tomorrow. Here is a special report.
Dramatic scenes at Ranil Wickremesinghe's office as thousands of protesters stormed the PMO. They are furious that Wickremesinghe has taken over as interim president. The police used tear gas to fend off the crowds.
Multiple rounds of tear gas is being shelled at the moment outside Ranil's office. Sorry.
That's fine.
The crisis in the island country deepened this morning as people woke up to the news that President Gotabaya Rajapaksa had fled to the Maldives with his wife overnight on a military plane. Reports say his final destination could be Singapore or the United Arab Emirates. On their arrival in the Maldives, President Rajapaksa, his wife and bodyguards were driven to an undisclosed location under police escort. Reports claim the president's younger brother and former finance minister Basil Rajapaksa has also left the country. The Indian High Commission in Sri Lanka meanwhile dismissed reports claiming that India had helped President Rajapaksa and his brother Basil to flee. Over the weekend, Rajapaksa had promised to resign today, that is Wednesday, and his failure to do so, along with his decision to leave Sri Lanka, angered protesters even more. It was virtual anarchy on the streets of Colombo as protesters took over government buildings and even the state broadcaster who went off air.
We don't have the food right now, we don't have gas, we don't have petrol, we don't have diesel, we don't have anything really, we don't have dollars. So all the poor people suffers a lot.
The people there, they don't have food, they don't have enough fuels, they are on the street. I don't know, this situation will become worse.
He left the country without signing his resignation. The speaker and the whole country hope that he would, send his resignation properly.
Ranil Wickremesinghe made a televised statement warning rioters that military and police had been told to restore law and order. He imposed curfew in a key province along with a state of emergency in the country.
ගෝඨාභය රාජපක්ෂ ජනාධිපතිතුමා ඉල්ලා අස්වීමෙන් පසුව ඇතිවෙන තත්ත්වය සාකච්ඡා කරන්නට සවුන්දා දවල් පක්ෂ නායකයින් මුණ ගැහුණා.
Under Sri Lanka's constitution, Gotabaya Rajapaksa has conferred powers on Ranil Wickremesinghe to function as the acting president under Article 37.1, which means Gotabaya has not yet formally resigned. If and when he does, then Parliament has to elect one of its MPs as president. The successor will hold the office for the remainder of the term of the vacating president. This election has to be held within 1 month of the vacancy arising. On Tuesday, expecting that the president would resign on the 13th of July, as he had said, the speaker had announced the date of the election as 20th July.
What next? Because now that Ranil Wickremesinghe has become the acting president and Gotabaya Rajapaksa has left his country and fled from his country, leaving his citizens, forcing them onto the streets, citizens here say that they are not going to stop and that they will continue, and their next target is going to be laying siege to the parliament. Reporting inside Ranil Wickremesinghe's office in Colombo with camera person Kumar Srija for NDTV.
Moving on, in news coming in from the United Kingdom, Rishi Sunak, the former Chancellor of UK, won the most votes in the first round of voting to succeed Boris Johnson as the Conservative Party leader and the UK Prime Minister. Rishi Sunak has scored 88 votes ahead of Penny Mordaunt at 67 and Liz Truss at 50 votes. UK Chancellor Nadhim Zahawi and former Cabinet Minister Jeremy Hunt were on Wednesday eliminated from the race to succeed Boris Johnson as the leader of the ruling Conservative Party after the first round of voting by the MPs. In fact, we will know on the 5th of September as to who will be succeeding Boris Johnson as the party seeks to rebuild its popular support after he was failed by the non-stop scandals.
I'll read the names of the candidates in alphabetical order with the number of votes secured by that candidate. Badenoch, 40. Braverman, 32. Hunt, 18. Mordaunt, 67. Sunak, 88. Truss, 50. Tugendhat, 37. Zahawi, 25. Therefore, under the rules that we agreed for this ballot, 2 candidates will be eliminated, Jeremy Hunt and Nadhim Zahawi. The others are all able to go forward to the second ballot.